meeting of the Audit Committee for September 7th of 2023. And as in prior meetings, just thank again all the Audit Committee members for allocating the time to attend today's meeting. Item 2 is the roll call.
Okay, calling a roll. Michael Abuzarol.
Here.
Trevor McLear.
Here.
Keith Lippman. Here. Okay.
Good. Okay. I'm assuming that both Sal and Maltrice will be showing up, so I don't know how we address that in the meeting, but we'll figure that out. So item 3, public comment. So we do have some individuals here in the audience that I guess I would say are from the public, but they're probably not necessarily. So we do have Andy Johnson, the Director of IT, the CIO for the county. I'm not sure your official title.
CIO, yeah.
CIO, okay, perfect. And then also we have Mr. Bruce Akers. So just a little bit about Bruce that I know about. Many years in public service, and I think in a bunch of capacities in this area. He was also the co-author for the current Cuyahoga County Charter that we're currently operating under. And I believe you also chaired the Charter Review Commission at a particular point in time. So, so Bruce is here as we're discussing primarily under the update on the current audit engagements. We're going to have some discussion about particular finding and recommendation that may impact internal audit. And so we thought it was helpful to really understand how the Charter Review Commission actually works here at the county. And so I think that's why Mr. Akers was invited. But you want to add anything?
That is correct.
Okay. So item 4, we need a motion to approve the minutes from July 6, 2023. Second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Okay, great. Item 5, so selfishly a topic here. So Sal's term is up at the end of 2023. And I would certainly hope and encourage the county executive to consider Sal for reappointment. And since Sal's not here, I would hope that he would consider being reappointed as we move forward. It'd be nice to have some continuity on the audit committee moving forward. Item 6, executive session. We're going to postpone executive session until 10:30. So, Monica, I want to try to get through everything on this agenda, and then we'll go into executive session at 10:30, and it probably will constitute the rest of the meeting today. Item 7A, the follow-up items from the second quarter meeting. So, Monica, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay. Okay. So starting with the first one, which is pretty much a standard one, is the bank reconciliation. That item is actually going to be addressed in agenda item 7B, but it's the status on the G-Force consultation. Continued funding for consultation will be needed to assist in implementation of the reconciliation module. The audit committee's concerns are what is the additional cost, and will this be secured in fiscal's 2024-2025 budget? So Lee Tucker will be addressing the audit committee as a part of the agenda 7B, and we'll address that item at that time. Next up, we have the Cuyahoga County Charter revisions, which are related to the unrestricted access to records. We've had some various different reiterations and work going on since back in March timeframe. There's an update for this as agenda item number 7D. I will be giving an update on that. Remote work policy. The committee member Committee Member McLear requested this remain a follow-up item for potential discussion as to the circumstance situational requirements. So the department policy was updated to include the revised limit from that was approved by the audit committee at the last meeting. HR employee payroll review. This is an update relative to the status of the overpayments in terms of two items, the collection and the 100% review. The update on the focus group activity for preventative measures to mitigate risk of overpayments, and AIG continuous monitoring completed. So first, let me kind of say this, and then I'll actually let Katie talk about she didn't have an opportunity last time she was out of the office to present to you what she thinks relative to the resources that are available to do the 100% review. But as it relates to collection, the Department of Fiscal has is currently working with HR. There's some information that was sent to some employees, those that are no longer employees with the organization, but they are still making internal decisions as to what to do with the remainder. My understanding is that's still in process. There's been no definitive decision made on that. I actually have talked with HR, Pat, and also legal relative to some other pathways that might be a remedy to help alleviate some of this on an ongoing basis. The AIG actually did do some work around this for 2020, so they did 100% as it relates to certain scopes and areas, one of which was, I believe, overtime pay. Another one dealt with payroll that at the end of somebody's resignation or termination. And then I think excessive hours. I believe those are the three. Don't quote me on that. But they have been doing what we call continuous monitoring. And they have a procedure that they will take 100% of the population and they'll run it through these analogs that they have, these queries and things, and it pops out stuff, and then they investigate based upon that. They recently issued a report relative to 2020's findings. They have also done this for 2021. They have not issued that report. I have had conversations with Alexa. We are working together and have looped in the law department to try to find out what would be the best pathway for these overpayments. So that discussion is still in progress, and we are still seeking legal guidance as to how that would be from a recovery perspective, how the county would go about collections to those specific overpayments that were found from her review and from our review.
Monica, a question. If the AIG is performing this function now, what is the audit department's role in this process? I'm just curious who's got responsibility here.
Very good question. We try to work together and leverage any controls that are operating. This would be what we would call, when we talk about the 3 lines of defense, this role that they're playing would be the second line of defense where they're doing continuous monitoring. When it comes time where this area would pop up on our risk assessment for a high risk, which means we need to look at it, we would be looking at that as a control, and we would be maybe testing that or looking to see that that was done, looking at what findings came out of it, and what the resolution was. That may be the extent of what we do, depending on what they've been doing, for this area. So at that time, that's kind of how that would work. Is we would hope to rely upon their work as much as possible to minimize the work that we would have to do. Okay. So then the next aspect of this is that 100% review. You've heard kind of some of this, what may be impacting, but the critical thing is that the IG's review was limited. So they did do 100% of population, but it was only for specific targeted things in which they were looking for. So I'll turn it over to Katie for any thoughts that you or discussion you want to have relative to the 100% review by management.
Sure, I think that, when I started here, this sounded like a good idea. I think the duplication that you just, I think Monica summed it up nicely, but I think the duplication of what is coming at particularly the HR department right now with the Inspector General, with the Audit Committee, with the PRC, it is a lot for a new director and the staff to take on, constantly looking back, meanwhile trying to move forward to make the process better. When Andy comes up here, he could go through some of the ERP module updates, which have been rolled out this year, is supposed to help with this aspect. Again, though, we are looking at review of the payroll system prior to the ERP rollout. So it's going to be a different look than with the new ERP system. So what you're getting back in 2020, 2021 is not what you're going to be getting after the first quarter of this year. The other kind of aspect we're looking at is how do we look at CBA negotiations to make it easier to minimize human error. One of those things is aligning in our CBAs the possibility of doing adjustments for anniversary dates on step increases to 1 day a year versus individual dates of time that they started here. That was just one element of maybe making things a little bit more streamlined, reducing the possibility of human error or the system having to be particularly rolled out with all these special elements to make that happen with the ERP. So I would say at this point with the Inspector General looking at specific items with external audit, constantly looking at it yearly as they do their scope, at this point I do not believe that we're in a position to look at this 100% and also continue to catch up and continue to move forward with making strides to improve the process.
So, I just want to make sure the audit committee members are kind of up to speed on this, and then if we just want to let this issue go, then we can let this issue go. But just to remind audit committee members, so this all started with an audit that internal audit did, where they looked at specific areas within payroll processing, and I think there were 6 different areas that you had identified in that audit report, and then within that audit report, there was a significant error rate within those 6 categories. And so there was a concern, and I think I've been the one that's primarily been raising a concern on this one, is whether or not that is sufficient because of the sensitivity associated with payroll processing. So it had always been my thought that because of the sensitivity associated with it and the significant error rate, that there may be a need for the county to do kind of 100% testing in those particular areas. For all those reasons that I just articulated. So now you've heard kind of the response back from management on this one. What do we want to do as a committee in regards to this particular topic?
Can you turn your mic on?
Can you tell us what the results of the testing that you did were? What were the results?
Are you able to look that up?
I mean, that's all contained within the audit report. Are you talking about the work that internal audit did or what the AIG did?
The AIG did.
Oh, okay. So the AIG's work, they have not released their report. So their reports don't get released, but they did in their semi-annual report indicate that they had findings relative to their 2020 work over the payroll area, that they had identified some overpayments.
Okay. So is the suggestion that we don't do anything without understanding what those results are? What are we suggesting?
I think that's a suggestion for management, but I don't want to put words in their mouth. I think. Well, go ahead. I don't know. Maybe you can answer that question.
I would just say that you are going to receive different results based upon the timing of this. So the ERP system rolled out in April in 2022. And so all of these different audits by audit and by inspector general were prior to that ERP rollout. Okay, so some of this should have been alleviated with a system taking on this controls, you know? And so I'm just saying, like, I don't think they're apples to apples here. And so for us to continue to go back to that pre-April of, 2022, I don't know. At this point, we need to figure out a process forward for the overpayments that have happened, but we have to continue to go forward. When we rolled out the ERP system, it was just a mass rollout. It was fast. It was probably clunky. I could speak for everybody in that. But since then, IT has worked with HR to roll out specific modules to help with this. And so even I could pinpoint that April of 22 date. However, the modules have rolled out slowly over the course of this year. And so again, it's not apples to apples. And every new module that is supposed to help with those controls.
Correct.
I'm sorry,
No, you
Patrice,
go ahead. Go ahead. You're probably going to
I guess I'm trying to, as are you, separate the past from the future. It seems to me, and I may not, I clearly don't have all the facts that some of the rest of you have, that if we're talking about the overpayments that took place in the past, that the AIG's office is involved, and that's probably where it should be if there's pursuit of repayment. I don't think that's the audit committee's role to oversee that kind of process. Might be to identify where those problems exist, but the audit committee, I don't think has the authority to, or the audit department to pursue it. So if one department within the county is taking ownership of the past, I think I'm, based on what I know, I think I'm satisfied that there's a possibility of good resolution. With regard to the new ERP system, new payroll system, and the go forward, seems to me that should be audited by the audit department based on the risk assessment profile and the ordinary course of events. And if the risk profile pops that to happen every year, then so be it. If it's every 3 years, then so be it, whatever the risk assessment says. So I may be oversimplifying, but that's how my brain works on this.
I think that was perfect, honestly. I can say that for internal audit, from what I know and having been very involved in this process, I would be very comfortable with the work that the IG has done and is continuing to do relative to this. I think that it will cover any significant concerns that we may have in that area. And as you said, on a go-for-it basis, if we manage it from a risk perspective, I think we'll be okay. Again, if the IG continues to want to go through with this, even on a go-for-it basis to do 22, 23, when we do our work, we're not going to redo work that they did. We're going to leverage that work as much as possible so that, to Katie's point, they don't have 2 and 3 people to come in and auditing the same stuff. That is not productive or efficient for anyone to do. So having the IG do this work, if they continue, and I say if, because Alexa has indicated she is not sure that they will continue to do this, but if they decide to continue to do this on an annual basis, then when it's time for us to look at it, we will leverage whatever work they have already done.
Mike, you've been deeper in this than I have, so I'm really, I would be influenced greatly by what your reaction to the suggestion I made was.
Sure. Is it possible, so the sense I got was the AIG was not looking at and again, I'm just gonna use my term, the 6 attributes that you guys audited, right?
They are not looking at 6 attributes, no. They're only looking at 3, to my understanding.
How difficult would it be for them to expand the 3 to the 6?
So I don't want to answer for them, but based upon what I understand, because I have talked to them about what they're doing, they're using data analytics. And based upon what the data analytics allows them to do, that's what they're comfortable doing, is those 3 attributes. I think if it were more knowing our IG's office, they would be doing more. But apparently the data analytics that they're running, they're only comfortable with those 3 attributes. So I can definitely put this, if you'd like me to have Alexa come and give you, more insight into that, I can. But based upon what I know, it may not be possible given the data analytics that they are currently doing.
Okay. So I don't know how I feel. This is a tough one because of the sensitivity, but I can't,
I would say if your intent is to expand it to the 3 additional analytics, I think for the sake of the administration and, the IT department, the HR department, the fiscal department, I think the easiest course of action is to make an agreement with the Inspector General that this is an audit function. I think for, speaking for the directors, it just becomes too cumbersome with 3 different agencies coming at them at all particular times. We want to be helpful. We want to improve the process. We want to make the county a better place. However, we're continually trying to do the day-to-day work and make the organization better. And we'd like to move forward, not saying we want to ignore past problems, but we need to find the lanes here. Who's doing what lane? And let's have that, a little bit of consistency, because I think it would be helpful to all the directors here to have that.
Reason, Mike, we got the new ERP. I mean, these problems that you're uncovering now probably have been going on for 30 years. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons. And I trust the staff, but I mean, humans make it, there's human errors. And everything that's been uncovered either has gone through our law department, HR, and or we got the prosecutor involved. So we have taken steps to get whatever they've uncovered back.
And I would just add, I agree with Katie's recommendation, and I think the amount of work that IT, fiscal, and HR have done to implement the new system to avoid these, hopefully, errors in the future, I'm comfortable letting this go and just moving forward. And I just don't think there's much more work that can be done looking back because of all the time and energy that is put in place to move forward. So I think we should just move on.
One last thing that I will add is that IT and the staff, they have done a lot of work with ERP, but there's also manual review that's happening with Lee's department. Lee has been very instrumental in trying to ensure and detect things more diligently in her area and she questions things. And I know because we have that back and forth conversation about some things that may come up, overpayments potentially, and situations thereof. So I'm very comfortable. Now, that's not the end all. You don't want someone having to manually do that all the time. But until systems get where they are appropriately controlled to the degree that you'd like them to be, and everything is in place as you roll it out and put it together, I think that what she's doing in terms of her manual reviews, as well as the system, and then everybody just has a heightened sensitivity around this now. We haven't had time because HR has been inundated, Lee has been inundated, and we have been inundated for this focus group to say that we're gonna continue to finish with our preventative and detective controls, but that is also on the table, that we have this focus group to ensure that there are preventative and detective controls that get identified and developed around this process. So I'm comfortable with it as well for those reasons. I don't really see a huge risk. It is a risk, but I think the risk is significantly mitigated.
okay. So, I mean, if this issue was in an area other than payroll, I guess I might be a little bit less concerned about it as I am right now. But I'm hearing from the audit committee just to let this issue go. the reports and first of all, I was unaware that the IG's office was actually doing what they're actually doing, which I think is actually good practice here at the county.
They just started it.
Okay, but you said they issued some report?
They have a report that was, semi-annual report that they issue, but they did do a report that's internal.
Okay, so the report that they did in this particular area that was performed by the AG's, it's not a public document?
It's not published publicly.
So it will never be a public document?
It is a public document.
It's a public document, they just haven't published
Published
the
it.
report.
Okay, for any of the years, excuse me, for any of the years where they've been doing this work?
Well, they just started this work. This
Okay,
is
but I
brand
got the
new.
sense from your prior conversation that they had been doing like 2020, 2021.
They just finished 2020 and they're working on 2021.
Okay.
So,
So ultimately, they will have a document that's available to the public that'll show the results of the work that they're doing?
right, it will be available to the public, but it will not be published.
Mike, would it be useful to sort of move past this for today and at our next meeting, have the Inspector General come give the committee a sort of status report and see if we have a comfort level as a result of that?
Is that a suggestion for the audit committee to consider? Okay, why don't we go ahead and do that? Okay,
Okay. All right, so we'll put that as a follow-up for this item for next meeting. The next follow-up item is the 2024 goals. And basically, it's to include a goal relative to the education of auditees on the process and value of internal audit. Committee member Talarico recommended an educational YouTube video be developed per the 7/6/23 meeting. DIA will consider this as a goal for 2024 year. And then the last item on the issue tracker, last item on the follow-up is the issue tracker semi-annual report. There were some revisions that were recommended to the summary, and those revisions were completed and will be available on future dates, issue dates for the report. Any additional questions, comments relative to follow-up items?
okay.
Okay.
Alrighty, great. So item 7B, the bank reconciliation. So Lee, thank you for sending your email yesterday, but
Good morning. Just an update on the bank reconciliation. Of course, we're still on target. We're still reconciling on a monthly basis, so we're up to date through end of July 2022. I'm sorry, 23. We expect to have August completed by mid-month this month. Now, we're still utilizing G-Force for consultations to help us when we run into any significant issues that we can't work through. We have an IT resource that's dedicated to assist us with the bank reconciliation and the CTM module. We're going to use them next year for 2024 as well. We are going to implement the full CTM bank reconciliation module. That's our hope. The cost will be $130,000. It's expected to take 3 months for implementation. They're currently working on an API-A module, so we're not really sure when the 3 months will begin, but we're hoping that it will begin in February of 2024. That the cost is in the budget. Once the implementation takes place, we have some set-aside dollars for the training of the new module to help us with troubleshooting of any issues that we run into after the standard implementation. And so that's where that stands as far as the use of G-Force. Is there any questions for regarding our contract or our IT resource for this module?
so summarize for me the benefit to the county by this investment.
So most of the process that we are using is still like manual. It's probably about 50-50. So the use of the this bank reconciliation module is that it resides within the module that we're using. Currently, our bank reconciliation is outside of the CTM module, so there's still a lot of manual processes that we do. The matching is, a lot of that is automated, but the bank reconciliation itself is outside the module. So therefore, it's kind of like you're doing something some extra tasks that could be automated. So that's what we hope to gain from that, more automation, so that it will be fully functional and automated. And so that, from the training that we received in the demonstrations, that we will be able to reconcile every single day, that the reconciliation should, so if today is November the 7th, we will be reconciling, I'm sorry, November 7th. September the 7th, we will be reconciling September the 6th, so that every day our reconciliations will be up to date. We have thousands of transactions, so it might take us 2 or 3 days to get through a whole day, where once we do this, we expect to have the reconciliation done daily versus like 2 or 3 days in arrears.
So it'll help speed up the reconciliation process? That's one outcome?
Correct.
Anything else from a?
Mainly that. We shouldn't have as many system issues because we're still using 2 different systems. Is that correct, IT? Okay, so we're still using 2 separate systems. So most of the transactions that we do reside in M4 Lawson S3, but CTM is a module that sits on top of Lawson. So that's where the transactions flow through. That's where the information comes through the bank. It comes into CTM. So if we're just doing everything in CTM, we won't have to, there wouldn't be a cross between the 2 different systems. Everything would be housed in the one system. So that is a big plus for us as well.
And G-Force is needed to act as a business analyst kind of role for them.
And this particular, so the $130,000 is for the module?
130.
The 130, so is it for the module or for the consultant?
It's for them to implement the module. It's for them to provide training, the setup, the install, and the training. Okay. And so that's expected to take 3 months. And then we're going to, of course, probably utilize them to assist after the initial installation, setup, and any training. So we're going to be more or less using them for troubleshooting. But because there is an IT resource, they're learning as well. So, yeah.
So the county owns the module's already been implemented, it's just not being used? Is that what the?
It's not activated, and I'm probably using incorrect terms. So we have the module purchased. Is that correct? Okay. But the module is not set up and it's not activated. So that's what the M4 team is going to assist us with. I'm sorry, the G-Force team is going to assist us with.
Thank you, Lee, and everyone who's been involved in getting the accounts reconciled and up to date. Definitely appreciate it. The other benefit maybe from this package is that the reconciliations will happen much quicker. Any discrepancies will be noted much quicker.
Correct.
And you can research them and have fresh data to research that as well.
Correct.
And just for perspective, dollars that run through the accounts on a monthly basis to give perspective to that $130,000.
Wow. I would say probably, tens of millions of dollars run through that
Monthly.
account each month. Right, because there's thousands of transactions each day. But like our main key bank account is probably like at least $90 million. You know, and that's just one account. So there's hundreds of millions of dollars and some accounts, of course, don't have a lot of activity. So that's not a concern, of course. But we have, well, I think before we had 41, but we added 2 new accounts. So we have 43 accounts now. So that's becomes daunting after a while, trying to do that manually. So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the bank rec? Okay, and I'm sorry, I forgot, this is Lennon Taylor. He's our financial reporting manager. He's joined us today in case there was any other technical issues that I needed assistance or a lifeline for.
Nice to meet you. Good morning. Okay,
All
thanks.
right, thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Item 7C, the external audit, post-audit meeting. So just a couple of comments. The audit committee has the responsibility to oversee the external audit for the county. So the purpose of this being on the agenda is we want to document the fact that we did meet with the auditors for a post-audit meeting on August 3rd of 2023 at 11. So again, it's just a document in the minutes that we actually fulfilled our responsibility. As we did discuss during the call, there's been significant improvement by the county in regards to the audit, the timeliness of the audit, the number of management letter and report comments. And so I did want to, again, extend our thanks at this meeting to Mike, although you probably don't do anything, really to Lee and Lennon and not just kidding. I'm just teasing. But again, just to kind of extend our thanks, or my thanks to the group for the work that you've done in that area.
Chairman Boozerall, just as a note for the record, all members attended that meeting with the exception of Trevor, who was excused.
Okay. So item D, the recommendation for revision to the Cuyahoga County Charter. Again, we've been discussing this as a committee for the last, I'm not sure, maybe a year or so. And then this also ties into the work of the peer reviewers. So what we're hoping to, as a committee, through a revision to the charter, is to try to resolve, I think, maybe two issues for us. One is the kind of the access of records for internal audit to allow them to be able to do their work. And then number two, this whole discussion, which kind of actually leads to the other comment, the whole discussion about the authority to audit, whether or not it's just executive level agencies, whether or not it's executive and non-executive agency levels, and whether or not it's a requirement to be audited, or whether or not it's an option to be audited, I guess would be my terminology with that. So we've been talking about this topic. Monica provided previously a draft of the charter. As a committee, we asked for that draft to kind of be streamlined to make it more charter language-like, if that's appropriate terminology. The county executive, I think, offered the assistance from the law department to work with Monica on coming up with some revised language. So that's a little bit of the summary of the project. So Monica, you want to provide an update?
Sure. So we have been working, since probably about 2 meetings ago, I believe, with the law department. And obviously, there's been some transition in the law department. And after meeting, I met actually with our new law director, Rick Maniloff, yesterday. And they are inundated. Like, when you talk about resources, constraints, they have a lot going on. And so I met with him to talk about a couple of different issues, this being one of them. And he has said that he will follow up with Greg Huth, who originally had taken this item on and put it on what they considered a matrix. Internal audit actually did enter a separate matrix item just so that we could have purview and be able to get feedback on it ourselves. So right now, that still stands with law department in their prioritization of all that they have currently to do. I did explain it to him. He was quite interested exactly in just what you said, what the pain points are. And to Katie's point earlier, the need to have people know what lanes there are in terms of, structure, jurisdiction, and, for us, definitely to be able to do our jobs, and for anyone else to know what their responsibility is. So did explain to him the importance, as you have just relayed to the people here. And so he certainly understands the importance and has said that he would work to see what they could do to aid. And if not, so this was the one thing that he did note, is he asked why, he noticed that we did not have we didn't have anything in the code. So none of our responsibility was codified like PRC's was, and like the IG's is. And I explained to him effectively that, through the discussions with this committee, and our representation through Mark, one of the considerations with codification is that codification cannot conflict with the charter. And so he understood that, and he says, but he's going to be looking, from per my conversation with him, to see what they can do to address the charter issue, and looking freshly to see maybe if there may be a avenue through codification. So that is something that he did mention and bring up. But again, this was just my first meeting with him, him having not had any previous discussion with anyone in his area or department about it. And so we are still kind of in queue.
I have, I guess what I'd call an overlay question. If I understand correctly, in the regular course of business, the county charter will not be open to be amended until 2027. I understand there are some extraordinary ways to accelerate, but that would be the ordinary course of business. That's 4 years from now. While I recognize this problem very clearly, I'm not sure why we're spending time trying to identify how to solve a problem 4 years from now. It seems to me that we would be better served to try to focus, how do we work within the existing structure to get as good as we can, given the constraints, inconsistencies, and however we would interpret the charter language juxtaposed against internal audit sensibilities and promulgated principles by bodies that govern auditing. So I'm just not sure what we're going to accomplish, trying, whether it's the law department's time or our time, to be working on charter language now. I think our time would be better spent working on what our own procedures should be in the interim. Just one person's musings.
If I may just kind of bring to the committee's remembrance how we got here. For quite a while, we've been kind of kicking this can down the road. And then we started actually having some issues with work and stoppage and holds on work, and having to issue reports with scope limitations. The tolerance level for that with the prior executive administration was that they did not like scope limitations. And so they wanted to try to resolve this issue sooner rather than later. I thought the audit committee was actually also under that same premise, is that because it had gotten to the point where it is now manifesting itself in our report that we are being limited by scope, because we have to say that, that this issue, you wanted to address it sooner if possible, rather than within the normal course of business. So that's why we were here. Now, if the committee would like to go.
So suggestion then is that we might want to consider the route to go to the voters earlier than 2027?
That was my understanding.
Okay,
yes.
All right.
I mean, that's if possible, but I do agree with your philosophy. We should be doing both, kind of improving the processes between now and whenever the charter comes forward, while we're looking, I think, bigger picture. And unfortunately, some of the interpretations of the charter is what's kind of put us in this a little bit of in this quandary here. So I as long as those interpretations stay the same, then I think the only potential solution is to look to amend the charter.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Keith. I don't think we should spend a lot of time. I think we should work within the limitations we have and do the best that we can within those limitations, and work towards a long-term goal of getting something within the on the ballot, along with other charter changes that are going to go in the normal process. To go through the expense and education piece of presenting a charter amendment outside of the normal schedule is monumental, in my opinion.
Okay. But I'm not hearing from the committee that we should stop working on proposed language at this particular point in time that'll be in place once the committee, once the county decides to go forward with the charter changes. Okay, right. Anything else from?
Yeah, just want to be clear for clarification. So you still want me to pursue this with legal to get word language now? Because I thought initially Keith's concern was doing stuff now for something that's going to happen 4 years later. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear.
That is my concern. That's correct. However, I'm also understand that we've invested a substantial amount of time in this. To not lose momentum, there's the opportunity to try to frame language and then put it on the shelf for a few years to be brought out at the time that the charter committee gets stood up and begins to do its work. I understand that. But having said that, I would understand whether it's the law department or internal audit, there may be higher priority things to work on many days than something that will sit on the shelf for a number of years. So I'm not opposed to keeping it in the queue. It's probably where in the queue it belongs.
Yeah, I mean, I just personally want to get the language done. We've been talking, yeah. So we've been talking about this for a while. Everything is up here. It's time to get, I think, down on a piece of paper. And again, we had something that we started with that I think has the right message. It's just maybe the length of it and the wording associated with it, I think, needs to be adjusted. And you know, is there language that was in the proposed charter that we could remove from the charter to make it easier for the voters to understand what's being asked of them and figure it out maybe through the codification concept? I don't know. That's a kind of
Yeah, we did. I did talk with him about that, and I did mention that we had that proposal and that it was lengthy and that the desire of the audit committee was to have something of more brevity, and henceforth the support is needed from them because I and Mark had pretty much gone where we could with that.
Mr. Akers was invited to this meeting. It seems to me this might be a topic on which he has some experience. Mr. Chair, would now be a good time to hear from him?
Sure, I wasn't sure if it was on this topic, but.
It was on a different topic, but it
I'm
is very
sorry.
similar. It was about the review commission, and so if you'd like to hear now. No, it's not.
Bush, there. Thank you, Mr. First of all, I never heard this wait to 2027. That's news to me, and I'll tell you why. I'll gladly recheck it. I was asked to be at this meeting, but I did not know the nature of what you were going to ask, so I took a chance that it might be some specific aspects of the charter, and so I called Mr. Kramer, who was the author of that of the charter, which our committee eventually adopted and sent to the voters. Well, I can't remember every single word. There was nothing in there about waiting at 27 for any amendments. As a matter of fact, we passed the voters passed the charter in 2011, but we who worked on it draft specifically put in to that charter that we made a lot of study of as you know, background. Ohio government, Ohio Constitution sets it up that the governing structure of each of the 88 counties is the 3-commissioner form of government. But if a particular county wants to set up its own government, have its own charter, they can proceed to do that. If my memory is correctly, of the 88 counties, I think 12 of them have subsequently dropped the commissioner form of government and adopted their own charter. That's what we did in Cuyahoga County did in 2011. But we made a note that, and in preparing that, we looked at other areas that had transitioned to this form of government. We looked at the Akron Summit County Charter. We looked at the Allegheny Pittsburgh Charter, just to guide us. We also specifically put in there a provision that we weren't sure we knew everything, or that we'd covered everything. So we specifically put in there that after 1 year, that was a time frame, but that if the existing government, once it came into office, and as they proceeded, saw some particular aspect of the charter that needed to be amended, clarified, corrected, we knew it was the document wasn't perfect. So we specifically set up that there would be a charter review commission that would talk to the incumbent county chair, the county executive, the county council, and department heads. What had we missed, or what had we interpreted incorrectly? What can we improve on? And in 2013, we actually came up with, there was 15 recommendations after talking to the county executive and the county council, all council members. And then that had to go back to the county council to officially put on the ballot. They did not accept all of our recommendations for change, but about half of them they did. And those subsequently went to the voters, and if my memory is correctly, they were all adopted. So we have revised the charter already. But not knowing exactly what questions you were going to ask today, I called Mr. Kramer last night to just get clarification. And so if your committee wishes to propose some county charter revision, you would make those proposals to the county council. Then they will obviously question you on it and see what your recommendations are and why and all that. And they'll obviously afford you an opportunity to testify before them to advance your amendments and what charter changes you want. And then they have the authority to put that on that ballot for the voters to vote on. They can reject it, but the point is that is the source for you to go to for any amendments you're talking about to put into the charter.
So thank you. That helps clarify, and I think we generally understood that, and I think the distinction here was just as Talrico stated, the process to go the amendment route for a single item could be time-consuming and costly, as opposed to what we understood. I'm not a county charter expert, but somebody came before us in a recent meeting and said the next regular course of business Charter Review Commission wouldn't be stood up until 2027. So that was the distinction. I understand it could be amended, but the question that I think we're trying to determine is whether we want to go the amendment route, which could be done sooner, or wait until the charter review process where there may be a whole host of other proposals.
I will gladly recheck it, but my understanding, the Charter Review Commission no longer exists. I chaired it, and then we went out of business. As far as any amendments, it's just what we just started. But I am not aware of a 2027, I believe you said, a review. I'll gladly check that. But while I don't remember that charter verbatim, I never heard that one.
All right, well, that would be great if somebody can check that.
Mr. Chair,
because
if I
quickly
can
we were told that.
provide a little bit of clarity. There's been 2 charter review commissions to date. One in 2012, the next one 5 years later. And then the charter calls every 10 years, which is what Keith is correct. Will be another one in 2027. So moving forward, it's every 10 years.
Mr. Chair, Since we have Mr. Akers up, would you like to have him go ahead and address the issue for which you asked him to be here, which is in the same line of, I guess, explaining about the charter review
So,
process?
so assuming that there's going to be a formal charter review committee established to put something on the ballot in 2027, explain that. Should I go into the detail of the finding and recommendation first, or do we just, do
I
I
would
need to
just,
do that?
I would probably ask his information from a sake of time
Okay.
perspective.
So we're gonna be talking about it a little bit later in the agenda. So the question for the audit committee is, assuming that there's a charter review commission created, and somebody wants to bring a charter amendment to the charter review commission for whatever the commission does. We're just trying to understand how the whole process works. So if we're an entity, and we want to make a change to the charter, ultimately, how does it work as you go to the Charter Review Commission? What's expected of the person presenting it? Just how does that whole process work?
Well, the procedures we followed, Mr. Chairman, was we knew there had to be a change in our form of government for a variety of reasons. So we followed the state law of setting up a commission, and that commission proceeded to interview a whole host of people, public officials, groups like this, telling us, we knew what certain aspects had to be revised, and had problems, issues we were having. But we knew we didn't have all the answers. We knew we didn't have all the subjects covered. So we held, I can't tell you how many meetings, call them interviews, what do you want to call them, and talking to a number of people to get input. We talked to government officials. We talked to people who were in public office or had been in public office. We talked to mayors, county commissions, commissioners, government experts, professors. We made every effort to get as much input as we could. We didn't have all the answers, and we weren't just going to go in and draw up a charter. As I said, we also looked at other charters in other counties, not only in Sumner County, but outside the state. So based on all that input is what led us to draw what we did. Perfect? No. As I said, we were already amended 2 years later. But we made the procedure, we deliberately made the procedure as easy as possible for any input from any organization, individuals, groups, committees like this, because we knew it wasn't perfect. And obviously, as time evolves and issues evolve, and you know, I'll leave it at issues arrive, it was made so that groups like this could come in and ask for changes, ask for improvements. Because even when all the research we did, we still didn't have all the answers. So we tried to make it as, I guess the word is flexible as possible, so that whatever you wanted to propose here, it did not make it difficult for you folks or any other entity that wants to improve the charter and improve your role in government.
So just to try to boil it down for specifics. So somebody has to come, let's say a county department wants to make a change, right? Okay, so who drafts the language? Who presents the proposed changes? Who answers the questions for the Charter Review Committee?
Well,
What happens after the Charter Review Committee says yes or no? That's what we're looking at, just more kind of.
So what I gather, you have certain things you would like to put into the charter to assist the auditing procedure, whatever it is. You would collectively, and whoever, probably some attorneys you want to use, draw up what you want. Here's our issue. Here's how we'd like to resolve it. And then you would take that to the county council, and then they would study it, ask a lot of questions, recommended changes or whatever. it is conceivable, but unlikely they could say no. The whole idea was to have them see what some entity of the county needs to be fixed or improved, changed, and then work on that. They're not there to block you. I can't speak for all the members of the county council, but they're not there to block you to get what you need to improve your process and doing your job, doing your assignment. But then they would work with you if there's an amendment to change the wording, and then ultimately they would vote yes, put it on the next ballot, or no, we're not going to accept it. I was trying to think of an example, but anyways, so it's not constructed to block you or to make it difficult for you. There is a clear process. There's no longer a charter commission, so the process works through the county council.
Mr. Akers, if I might.
I'm sorry.
What the committee would like you to talk about is in 2013, you chaired, was it 2012 or 2013, you chaired the review?
Review commission. Yes.
Right, and so they'd like you to talk about the experience during the review process, how that review process works.
Oh, okay.
When people come in to tell the review committee, is there a requirement that they present language, or can they just present a specific concern for review to the committee, and then someone else that, within the county or that the commission has access to, whether they draft the language? So they kind of want to know that process.
Well, thank you. Obviously, you have an issue you want to revise or do something from what was presently the situation. Someone, I'm not necessarily, but presumably be a lawyer who is going to put into words, into writing, what you can state to the county council, here's our issue, here's our problem. You can present the wording, or you can ask a lawyer to help you. There's no set way on that. Whoever wants to draw the wording, ultimately, the county council has to have the wording, has to have. So what do we want to put on the ballot to accomplish what you're trying to achieve? So it's not a set person or a set role.
Mr. Chair, if I could add a little bit, I think a little bit more context to where it might be helpful for the committee. So council back in early 2012 passed governing rules for charter review commissions. So there's a little bit of structure between the 2012 and the 2017 Charter Review Commission. It will be in place for 2027. What happens is, in both Charter Review Commissions, and this is required by the rules, they will issue, in essence, a report when they're done. And that report will have recommended charter changes with the language that would go to county council. It's a full report. And then there's also what referred to as a minority report if it doesn't get the full or a majority support of the Charter Review Commission. Normally, and this is also in the rules, the law department provides legal counsel to the Charter Review Commission. We've seen it both ways over the last two, where a presenter who would want a charter change will either generally present the topic to the Charter Review Commission, and then they will discuss it and ask the law department to come up with that language. Or there have been other presentations from departments where they will actually present the legislation or the proposed legislation, the exact language that they would like to see, and then the Charter Review Commission will go from there. But ultimately, it can be done either way. But in their final report that they recommend to council, it has the final language that they want council to consider. And then by, I believe it's in the charter or the code, council then either has to vote each recommendation up or down. In the past, the one that Mr. Akers is referring to in 2012, there was a couple that they voted down and they tweaked that language, so they had to introduce new legislation, but they have to vote up or down every recommended charter change to the Charter Review Commission, or to the council from the Charter Review Commission. So I think it is more helpful if language is presented to the Charter Review Commission from the particular requesting department because of, they're getting a lot of recommended changes to the charter presented at them, at least the last two. I'm not sure what 2027 will look like, but they are also volunteers on the commission, similar to most on the audit committee, right? So if they have something that they can look at and tweak on their own, it's a lot easier. It helps that, but I would recommend that, but it could be done either way.
Okay.
Thank you very much, I agree.
So, so maybe it would be helpful to send the rules or whatever it is that Trevor was referring to.
Okay, I'll have Trevor provide those.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just
So for, yeah.
one more question.
Yeah.
Trevor, to best of your recollection, since the 2017 charter review, have amendments been proposed to council? And has anything ultimately gone to the voters in the
Not
last 5 or 6 years?
Not since the 2017 Charter Review Commission. There were a couple in between the 2012 and the 2017 charter one. But since then, and I might have to double check, Keith, there might have been one, and that might have been the sheriff's. I don't know if the sheriff one was a result of the 2017 Charter Review Commission. It ultimately ended up being the one council initiated, but I have to look to see on that timing. But if there was one, it was related to the sheriff and putting a term around it. And I do think that might have been the one after 2017.
So it seems to me, and maybe this is where you were going, Mike, a decision needs to be made whether we are going to go the amendment route or wait to 2027. I mean, that's,
Right, and as I've said, I think.
everything flows, once
Right.
we make that decision, everything
It-
flows from there.
I think I've been pretty consistent in these meetings saying it is, I think, a challenge to do it in between the charter review commissions because you need 8 votes of council. You need a council member to initiate the legislation. You need a council member or multiple council members or a county executive to support, to come up with a language, right? It's just a lot more challenging. As Sal mentioned, if the moment the county puts an issue on the ballot, if it's in a municipal year, general election, you're costing $2 million or so for a general countywide election that might not have existed before. You're at least charging back to the cities less at the Board of Elections. So there's a lot of issues in between health and human service levies and things of that council might be hesitant to put something in. I can't speak for all 11 of them, but it's finding that one council member or the executive that really gets behind a charter change in between charter review commissions. It's not easy.
Chair, may I be recognized?
Yeah.
So, Trevor, am I correct to understand that the sheriff change was out of the normal term? Right?
Yes, there were both charter review commissions, and I have to go back and look at the history, Katie, but both charter review commissions recommended tweaks to the sheriff, I believe, and I think the one that ultimately went on the ballot was was not part of the 2017 Charter Review Commission. I think it happened in 2019.
So, I mean, this is a recommendation clearly, and to whether you want to go forward with it. I think that what would be more beneficial is to make some bullet points on some of the struggles that are happening right now and present those to council and ultimately see if there's any momentum there in having support so they understand what the limitations. Clearly, this committee was formed with a new form of government to have some kind of checks and balances on the county, right? So, same with PRC has their role, the Inspector General has their role. And so if the expectation is that you're having difficulty meeting some of the obligations that was set out in the charter of having those checks, I think that making some clear language and some bullet points instead of forming language of a charter change, maybe give some examples of where there have been issues that have come up and put it to council to see if there's any if there could even be 8 people who'd want to do it off-cycle, is to look at. If there's not, then, you know, to your point, maybe the time spent on this is 2 years from now.
Mr. Chair, just to add, the sheriff change to the charter was in November 2019, so that wasn't part of the recommended charter review changes from the 2017 commission.
We'll give that suggestion some thought to see if logistically the county council is willing to do that. But in the meantime, continue, we're gonna need the language anyway, so, but I'll figure this one out a little bit and figure out what the best approach
Mr.
is.
Chairman, can I make one comment? If I heard you correctly, and you're correct that you have to get 8 members of the 11 supporting. And I'm not an auditor, so I mean, if I say something out of your professional field, be flexible. But I want to make an analogy here. If this, whatever languages you want to, whatever change you want to make, that tends to be, and don't take this wrong way, far more technical than situation with the sheriff. And I would think that, I'm assuming you will have very legitimate reasons for these revisions. And following up on your point, assuming we can get through council, and assuming you would want to find a member or 2 of council who agree with this, who understand it, who like what you want to do. And I found some issues, they will then round up some of their colleagues to make it, to at least achieve the 8. Whereas on the sheriff issue, that was political, whether you want to say it or not. That had to be political. It was a person in office. It was a position, and there were problems going on in that office, as you all know. So I would make, and this is worth exactly what you paid for. I would be willing to bet that whatever revisions you want to come up with, you sit down and find a couple of councilmen who will say, well, that makes sense, let's do it, and they get behind it. Because that's not going to be, I think I can fairly say, political. It's not going to be something that would get 2 sides for it. So people may disagree with it, but I find it very hard that it would be politicized. So I think as your good point, let's go revise, make your revisions you want to make, which I presume are well documented and well reasoned, and then go do a little checking out some of the council, and get a spokesman or 2 for you to get their fellow colleagues in for it.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Akers. I appreciate your
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Akers. And again, thank you for your service and for your willingness to be here and serve again. Thank you.
So we got 15 minutes, so we're gonna have to figure this out pretty quickly. All right. So item 7E, the update to council. So initially, that update to council was scheduled. Previously, it had to be delayed, so now it's currently scheduled for September 19th. Again, this is the opportunity for, through the report that the audit committee approved, for it to be presented to county council to show that we're in compliance with the expectations of the audit committee and also reflects the work of internal audit. So is there anything else on that, Monica?
No, just anyone that would like to attend, put out the meeting notice if you'd like to join us for that meeting.
Okay.
Council members, committee members.
So item 8A, the director evaluation. So we did receive director's evaluation, I believe a few weeks ago, and as I think everybody's aware, as the audit committee, we're working to complete our portion of that evaluation. So any other comments on that, Monica? Any other comments from you?
Oh, no.
Okay. So item 8B, the budget update. Again, we approved the budget. We approved a budget at our last meeting for the next 2 years for the internal audit department, with the hope that the county executive would ultimately approve what it was that the audit committee had approved, and then present that to the county council through the budget process. So Monica's been a couple of meetings. You want to give us a brief update on where that budget stands?
Yes, I actually have. So we did meet with executive management, OBM, to discuss the 2024 budget. They kicked off the budget review process. We did present the budget that the audit committee was recommending. They understood the budget and had agreed to give that consideration, appropriate consideration, given other things that they also were asked to, from other departments, because, they have to have a balanced budget. Right, Katie? That was the main thing, is trying to make sure everybody gets what they need and that in the end, the budget is balanced. So as an update, I did reach back out to OBM to see where they were in their process relative to the budget process, and was told that they are, and I had the email, I'm looking for it right here. But I was told that basically they're still currently in their process. The revisions have gone and are internally being reviewed. If they come back from the executive without any revisions, they don't expect it to, but it could. But for right now, they think that they're not expecting, historically, there has not been that kind of issue or concern where they have revised the budget that has been asked or approved by forwarded to them by OBM, particularly for our area. So they were not expecting it, but again, anything is possible. It's, there are considerations that the new administration has to have. So things that historically may have happened may have to change. So, but for right now, my understanding is that the budget that you approve should be the budget that we're looking at being presented to council come October.
Okay. Any questions on the budget? So good news. Any questions on the budget? Okay, perfect. All right. Items 8C, I'm going to maybe bounce around these a little bit. So I want to go to item 3, the semi-annual issue tracker, and then the changes in process due to the departure of Catherine. So just a little bit of history here. The audit committee, with significant interaction of the prior county executive, had asked for Catherine's role to be established, or duties to be assigned to somebody within the county executive side to handle really two primary functions on behalf of the department and the audit committee. One was to kind of be the intermediary between internal audit and the various county departments. So if there were issues in regards to county departments being responsive to internal audit or providing information to internal audit, it provided a contact person for internal audit to go to try to help resolve the issue before it was ultimately brought to the attention of the county executive. So that was kind of one role of Catherine. The other role of Catherine was played significant role in regards to the recommendations that were coming from internal audit. So she worked with the county agencies to help implement the recommendations. She kind of kept track of them, as well as the internal audit department. But she played a very, I thought, great role in working with the county agencies to really make sure, A, that they understood what the recommendation meant from internal audit, and then also to be working with them to help in the implementation of the recommendation. So Catherine has left, unfortunately, for some of us. So my question I guess I'll start with you, Michael. Has there been any discussion who's going to be filling that role moving forward? Roles moving?
Yes, there has. So from an executive liaison perspective, my understanding is currently that would be Katie Gallagher will be stepping into that role to be the liaison, the champion for audit if we run into any challenges, issues, and need anything escalated. She would be the one that would be the liaison to do that. So that's that first piece that Catherine was doing. That latter piece relative to findings and issues, we had a conversation before Catherine left. We met, Katie, Catherine, and my team, to discuss what we could do, what that would look like, and based upon what we understood were the limitations, again, resources. Catherine was a great person, but I used to tease her that she was like an octopus. She had like 8 hands, going more so sometimes. And so just can't really easily expect the organization to absorb that without, I guess, some other costs in other places. So what we talked about and discussed was that internal audit would play a more active role. It's not something that's unheard of in other entities. We were actually pretty blessed to have Catherine play that role for us. It's one of the commendable practices that was noted by our peer review assessment, and one that they advocate in other organizations, of course. But that follow-up process of keeping a finding warm and active and going while, we are, after we issue our report, until we can come back and follow up on it, so that when we get to it, it's not cold and now they're like, oh, we didn't forgot about, or you didn't have time for it. So what we had said is we would start developing internal processes, and I'm going to have Josh kind of talk to you through the internal processes that we said we would do to kind of, defray some of that and make sure that there's no impact to follow up because that is a responsibility of the audit committee to ensure that items, findings, recommendations are appropriately and timely followed upon, to ensure that there was no impact to that. As it relates to me and what I think about our team absorbing that, it is going to be additional work. And we're going to have to see exactly how much that's going to impact our resources. But my promise to the audit committee is that if I feel that it's too taxing for us, or that it's requiring us to fall behind in some way, shape, form, or fashion, I will feed that back up to you, and with the solution, hopefully, for that issue or that problem. But, right now, we don't know, but I'm willing to try to be able to respond to what management has says they need from us at this point in time.
Can I, for the sake of time, so it sounds to me like you're comfortable with, I don't want to put words in your mouth, there is a solution in place toward handling the 2 issues that Catherine was doing. And maybe you can hold off going through those processes to the next meeting just for the sake of time. But as long as there's a comfort level that the role that Catherine was playing is now, which, by the way, congratulations on another function for you. But as long as we're comfortable that that role is going to be fulfilled moving forward, then I guess we don't need to talk about it anymore at this meeting.
Well, I'd like to jump in here. So I guess I have a different position on this matter. One, I think there's multiple deputy chiefs, and the departments that I oversee are the bulk of the departments that you guys are auditing, between IT, fiscal, HR. And so one of the things that I feel seeing here is there's silos, and I'd like people communicating more, but also the directors, and I have 2 directors I oversee right here, so they can chime in. They have to have a sense of accountability here. They're adults, right? They give findings, they should be following up on them. They're director level. And so my job is to make sure that they're doing that, and I've worked with Debbie Berry, who's the bulk of the other, she's the chief over the economic development housing, where you'll see another of the audits, to make sure she's following up with her directors. But we have to put this ownership on the director level to make sure that they're following up with their matters. And our job is to make sure that they're following up with that too. So I appreciate Catherine's role, but at the same time, I think that removing these silos and having direct conversations with audit and making sure they understand what's required of them on the follow-ups is also important. So maybe my position of this is a little bit different, but you can, both of these can attest, is they get multiple emails from me when I feel like there might be a gap with the audit matters.
Reason that I agree we can't take a more greater role. And like, get people over public works, things like that, chiefs, same thing.
And that's what our process was going to kind of cover, is how we're going to implement that request.
Right, so 100% agree with your comments. It didn't, that same philosophy maybe didn't exist previously, which is why we kind of push as a committee to have that role established. So as long as things are working great, fantastic for the audit committee. If there is an issue and Monica and her team have an opportunity to know who to go to try to get the issue resolved, which it kind of sounds like, then that's great also.
In mind, in the past, everybody went to the chief of staff. I mean, he was one person, so now we have this extra layer that, we report to and we're accountable to.
All right. Anything else on this particular topic? All right. What do we do? Can we delay 15 minutes executive session? Yeah. Okay. All right. So item C2, hopefully we can get through this one pretty quickly. So there was a concern regarding a contract that was part of the audit plan for IT general control risk assessment. Through the processing here at the county, it was suggested that it has to go through the Technology Approval Committee. I don't know, TAC. Is that I have the right? Okay. Raised maybe a little bit of a concern in regards to independence impairment. So, Mark, you want to go? Has this been resolved? Have you gone through the TAC?
It has not been resolved, but when I met with Rick yesterday, it became clear that there may be some misunderstanding as to what this actually is. The thought was that this was software of some sort that was being implemented on behalf of us and that in some way it was going to integrate with this. And so I filled him in on exactly what this is, that this is basically augmenting of our work, our services, because we don't have the resources here in-house to do it. And so he has agreed to go back and talk with the specific legal person that is writing the opinion on this and get more in depth. But he actually took a very good interest in it and understood it pretty well and was very acknowledging the impedance, the independence role and understanding the independence role. And I think we were both on one accord with when there should be TAC approval of something, if it's going to touch our IT system, if it poses risk or danger to our IT systems, absolutely TAC should review this. This is not that. And so, I think that there was some misunderstanding, but I'd like to give an opportunity as you see fit for anyone else to express.
Who was Rick? Did you say Rick?
Rick is the law director. So this item actually got forwarded to the law department for a legal review.
Okay. But from your perspective, you head up the TAC, Andy?
Yes, I do. You want me to? Yeah. Hi, good morning, Andy Johnson, Chief Information Officer. So TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, is my responsibility. I don't want to go against what Rick Maniloff might be coming, to advise me, but my interpretation is, hey, TAC is responsible for reviewing all IT hardware purchases, but also IT services. And this is coming really originating out of Ohio Revised Code, and that got trickled down into our county code. So that is our interpretation. We did talk to the law department, and they agreed with this opinion. Our position here is not to dictate what's getting audited. It's not to dictate how it gets audited. But in fact, when it comes to the services that they provide, we think it's pretty clear in the code that does need to go through TAC. So apparently, I did refer this to the law department, and we did get an opinion that, yeah, that should go through TAC, but that has not been published. That is getting escalated to Rick, it sounds like. So, I'm happy to meet with Rick and follow his opinion.
And you're familiar with the detailed services that are included within this particular proposal?
Well, I had team members that were part of the review committee that actually did some scoring on that. But I think then when it comes down to the TAC review. That is our process, right, is to review those software, any sort of IT services, that is our process. And so here I'm faced with, geez, here's our process, here's what Ohio Revised Code. Now I've got audit saying, well, let's skip that process. That's sort of my position and why I referred that to law.
And I'd like to say audit is not saying skip anything relative to what is supposed to be underneath there, but I think the fundamental difference is whether this is IT services. And since Josh worked on this, I'll have him kind of discuss what these services are and what the situation is, because he's the one who brought it to me.
All right, so the services that are going to be provided is in an IT general control risk assessment. So they don't plan on performing any testing. It's going to be an assessment of the design of controls. So it's going to be looking at processes, procedures, not touching anything within the system, and then developing testing plans for us to possibly do internally or possibly look at another external resource in a future year. So we're not actually touching any form of system. So when I look at IT service, I look at it as something that's going to impact or possibly pose a risk, whereas this would not.
I don't want to spend too much time on this one. Go ahead.
Hopefully a simple question. If we didn't have, if TAC approved this, even though the department may disagree that it needs to, but if it did, would that end the issue?
It wouldn't end the appearance. So the standard requires us to be independent in appearance and in fact, and I would agree. If they agree there is no impedance in fact, but there could be in appearance. That's the only thing that I say. The committee can take it at that. I'm just giving you
But
what
they would be approving, TAC would be approving a recommendation from the department, so I'm having trouble understanding where the independence
So the
conflict could be. If they disapproved, then I get it.
that disapproval would be in fact, and that would be true. But the standard says that we must be independent in appearance and in fact. And so the appearance part of that is that the appearance is that we have someone making a decision or deciding what work internal audit does. So that is the issue relative to appearance. Again, my responsibility is to bring the issue and the concerns to you to ensure that we conform with the standards. That's it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can add to what Keith was saying, I told Monica this, I don't see going to TAC as a impairment or independence issue or not. I said to her, if they say no, it's a different discussion, but I would prefer we just go through the process, let TAC review it. TAC has provided feedback on other contracts and things of that nature. I'd rather just go through the process and then come forward if they say no, which I don't see that happening, but this could have been done, contract could have been in place if we would have just went through the process. And here we're a month or two or whatever it's been, still talking about it. And if some random committee believes it's an independence issue, so be it. I can live with that. I don't see it as a problem.
When's your next TAC meeting?
We can have them we can have an emergency TAC meeting, but generally they're Thursdays. So we have a pre-TAC actually going on, I think, probably right about now.
So I think there's just a desire to get this thing through. So it is on the audit plan. I mean, we consider it to be audit services. So I get why there's a little bit of confusion here, but as a committee, we've been dealing with this topic again for a long time, and we finally got a vendor that's willing to do the work. So if we can just somehow get it approved, or if we can't get approved, let us know, and then we'll figure out how to handle it.
And committee members, please, I'm willing to do this, but because of what my knowledge base is, and I'm charged with the charter charges me to make sure we're in compliance with standards, I need your direction to be able to say, yes, go ahead and take this, because it would, in my professional opinion, be independence in appearance issue, not in fact.
Would it be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question. So the purpose of the contract is to ensure that IT has proper controls in place. Okay. And Andy, I presume that you've had insurance agents come to you to check on cybersecurity and all sorts of other people checking on whether or not our systems are secure. I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. Our organization, we get cyber audits yearly in order to get cyber insurance. So I assume those are going on?
That is going on, yes.
Okay. Is there an opportunity for us to rely on existing reviews of internal controls within the IT department?
Yeah, no, that's the whole purpose for on the audit plan. We've not looked at, from an audit perspective, the risk. So we've not assessed the risk as it relates, as per the professional responsibility. We need to assess that risk appropriately. We don't have the in-house expertise to do that, so we can't rely upon, like, some other entity to do it. Now, once we get in there and we see what the risk is in the controls and how they line up, as we're doing our test work, we may be able to leverage some work that someone else has done, but in doing the risk assessment, we have to actually perform that risk assessment.
So it's the risk assessment that the services will perform?
Correct.
Okay. So are you looking for the audit committee to pass a motion advising you to go to
That's
TAC?
it. Yeah, simply just direct me, please, to do that.
I'll make a motion, subject to somebody perhaps helping me with the wordsmithing on the fly here, that the audit committee support the department executing the engagement if it is, if the vendor is approved by TAC.
What if it's not?
Pardon me?
What if it's not?
What if it's not?
That's not part of my motion.
Yeah. No, I'm saying,
I'm willing to, if it's not passed by TAC, reevaluate based on, presumably, they would present reasons why they didn't approve it, and that might move me to a different conclusion, so I'd rather not do it hypothetically.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all in favor of approving that motion, say aye. Does that work for you? The way it's
that works.
Okay.
All I need is you guys to say, yes, I can do that, please.
So all I opposed, okay, perfect, all right. All right, so we've got this issue of this remediation of governance, which is gonna be more than 5 minutes, I think. So I don't know what we want to do here. So let me try to get through this one in a couple of minutes and then see if we can just get an action plan on this one. So there is a pending finding and recommendation regarding what's deemed to be governance level findings. But in essence, it is a finding and recommendation that would, again, require a charter change to try to eliminate this executive, non-executive language in the charter. I think it's primarily as it impacts payroll and HR practices. Am I right so far?
HR compliance.
HR compliance, okay, so primarily as it impacts HR compliance. The finding and the recommendation put the responsibility to internal audit to be the owner of this particular finding and recommendation, and then ultimately be the person who in my mind is the owner of this, and ultimately is then responsible for presenting it to the Charter Review Commission for their consideration and ultimately their approval. And so since it puts work on the internal audit department, which ultimately reports up to the audit committee, I consider us to be kind of management in regards to providing a response to this particular recommendation. So we talked about it at the last meeting, and so what I guess and there's a little history here that I don't know if it's necessary to go through it. I guess we may or may not need to, but the purpose here is there needs to be some type of a response to this particular recommendation, and since I consider us to be management and we're the ones that have to respond to it, is it something that we think makes sense for internal audit to ultimately be performing? I think conceptually, from my perspective, we agree with the concept of this, of trying to ultimately deal with this executive, non-executive challenge that exists here within the county. But is internal audit the right body to be the owner of this particular topic? Which then goes into the whole discussion of the work to present it to the Charter Review Commission. We got 2 minutes to discuss it, if we could possibly discuss it. So how do you guys want to, so that's the whole issue here. And I know that's a lot, and you have the control condition forms there.
Mr. Chair, I think in part this came about in discussions with Monica, because I think the internal audit, they were trying to figure out internally who to assign this to. When I talked to Monica about this a couple month or so ago, might have been a little longer, there was consideration, should it be council, should it be the county executive, should it be a department? And I suggested it be internal audit because internal audit is suggesting the charter change, right? It's, again, and we've heard how the process works. So I was the one that suggested internal audit because I didn't have a better recommendation, because if you say the executive, well, to Keith's point, right, what if it's in 4 years and county executive decides not to run again or isn't here, or if it's a new 6 new council members, right? So putting it on one of those, I just didn't think it made sense to ensuring who is responsible to oversee a potential charter change. So that's why I suggested internal audit, because at least there'll be some consistency, I think, in terms of staff. It's the department's report, and depending on how often charter changes happen, that's why I was recommending internal audit, because again, it's their recommended change to the charter. It's not a council member's recommended change. It's not the county executive's recommended change. Fiscal isn't recommending the change. I don't know who else would be responsible to oversee a charter change, which we've heard the process. It's not, you don't just say, oh, I'm changing the charter, and then it changes tomorrow. So.
And we have no, I support that. I think it's well within our wheelhouse to present, so long as we don't, to your concern, have to do the legal language around it. Certainly if we have to just go and present and provide support, which we've already done in the work that we've done, henceforth the concern that we're raising, I don't see a problem. I don't see it outside of my responsibility to be able to do that. I don't think it'll be much work, but even if it is, I think it's still within the wheelhouse in which I'm responsible for, to help facilitate good governance within the organization. Because this is, the whole issue with this is, it's a governance issue. And with this governance issue, there's no real one party who has that responsibility to change the charter other than the review commission. The Charter Review Committee, sorry.
So to the audit committee members is, and again, in my mind, there's a difference between somebody else owning it and internal audit presenting why that charter change, why it makes sense from the internal audit perspective to change the charter versus being the sole person kind of presenting it to the Charter Review Commission. I think that's the discussion. That's the quick discussion I want to have on this topic.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know how we get there, but I would like to see that we approach this in a non-adversarial manner. I don't want us to present something to the county council that hasn't been vetted by the PRC and HR and the county executive and others. We need to hear what they have to say, because ultimately, if we present something to the county council all on our own, then we're subject to getting criticized for not involving others and taking into account their concerns. So again, I don't know, I can't at this point lay out a plan. I think we're working towards that, but I wouldn't want to see this continue as in an adversarial way, whether with any department that we work with. And one comment I have about the HR control condition. I think this is part of what we're talking about, is the authority to ensure compliance. Aren't the federal and state agencies ensuring that the county is in compliance with nearly all of these bulleted items? Again, not something we have to spend time on now, but that's at least something that's jumping out at me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I find the suggestion of trying to, not my word, not yours, collaborate with the impacted departments to be a good one. The question is how, if we were to go that route, how best to do it. And I'm thinking of the way that Mr. Akers described the county charter review process of they called in the interested folks and heard what they had to say on issues and then formulated their plan. I could see we might do the same. I don't think it's going to be very productive to assign this to the director to go meet with other directors and then we get reports back and forth. I think that's a process that we're going to be having this on our agenda for meeting after meeting after meeting. If we want to follow the path that Sal is suggesting, perhaps we have a special meeting just for that purpose and ask the various directors to come and discuss the issue.
Okay, so the challenge right now is the resolution on this, I think, is impacting internal audit, finalizing the HR compliance report. So what do we want, I mean, this control condition form. There's a recommendation per section 12, the executive is charged with appointing a charter review commission every 10 years. The next appointment is expected in 2027. DIA recommends executive agency management notify the DIA when the next set appointment occurs. Okay, nothing there. DIA can then submit this finding and a recommendation to consider amending the charter to better ensure the county has adequate assurance services organization-wide. So how would we respond to this? There's the recommendation. So really, I think the responses are either, the audit committee agrees that internal audit should be the owner of this particular recommendation and be the person who primarily presents it to the Charter Review Commission, or internal audit should be a support person to the person who ultimately is responsible for presenting this to the Charter Review Commission. I mean, that's the distinguishment.
Well, I think what I was suggesting is that we're likely not ready to make that recommendation today without hearing from the other departments as to what their challenges are. Second question, which is, since this will get ultimately moved to 2027 unless we choose to go an amendment route, we still have the work of the department to do. And
Sorry, this is separate from the other one before. The other one was ours. This one is governance, and it would totally be 2027.
okay, fine. It makes my point even clearer. Thank you. So I think is the director looking for guidance from the committee as to what do I do in these areas in the interim?
No, sir.
Okay.
The guidance that we need is who's going to accept the action plan. This isn't a finding that's come out of a report. There's a governance issue. Who's going to be responsible for getting that governance issue before the Charter Review Committee? That's what we need to understand.
And the problem with deferring a decision on this is, like I said, it's impacting the release of the HR compliance audit.
Why? What,
You have to have a recommendation and as to what to do with the finding. You just can't leave it hanging out there that this is a finding without a resolution or a recommended plan of action. So the recommended plan of action is as Chairman Abuzaral just read, which is we have asked the executive to take their part and to notify us when, per statute, they're going to convene, and that at that point, we would have this. And the other thing that I must say here is that in our work that we're doing there, where we're getting coverage, remember the coverage you wanted? We're getting more coverage, we're seeing more things. We're thinking we're gonna have more governance type issues like this. So we're thinking this is just the first of maybe a few more, but we're thinking there might be this parking lot sort of thing that, where there's a somewhat a list of issues at a governance level that needs to go before the committee. Who's going to take that to the committee so that they can decide whether or not they want to take it up or not?
so the recommendation in your report couldn't be, you referred it to the audit committee and the audit committee is going to process it?
That's what we
And-
talked about
and then-
last time. That was the
Well,
recommendation last time.
and let me say, if there's a need to bring a certain amount of closure today, I agree with the chair, well, I'm not sure you said this, because of the lack of, maybe it was Trevor who said it, because of the lack of identity of anywhere else to put it, I take responsibility, and I would say we take that responsibility. That said, I'm not absolutely convinced that we have all the information that I would like to have to make that decision, but if I had to make a decision today, would be the route I would go. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
What do you want to do? I don't know what to do on this one. I mean, we don't have enough information to support what you're recommending to the committee, I guess, is what I hear.
I've provided you the information we have as it relates to this. If there's additional perspective that the committee would like, we certainly can do that. And again, no problem, it's just going to delay the report. So
So how about if our response is that, that the audit committee supports the need for this item to be modified through the Charter Review Commission process, but we're not certain who should be the owner of presenting that. And more information is needed by the audit committee to make that ultimate decision. Is that enough of a response that we can get this report issued?
if you guys say that, absolutely.
Is that good enough for the audit committee? So we're not necessarily agreeing to do something that we might not be comfortable with? Like I said, 100% I agree with the concept. I'm just not sure of your role and ultimately the role that it puts the audit committee in. So is that a good, okay, I don't know what I just said, but I'm sure it's in the minutes, so.
It's in the minutes, we'll get it.
Okay, all righty. All right, so I'm gonna now go to executive session, if that's okay.
Would you like me to move that, Mr. Chairman?
So I gotta read something and then.
Okay.
All right. So all meetings of the Cuyahoga County Audit Committee are open to the public under the Ohio Opens Meeting Act. However, the committee may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, the committee confers outside of the hearing of the public, but may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All public decisions are made in public. So is there a motion to go into executive session to consider the appointment, discipline, and dismissal of a public employee or official, the investigation of complaints against a public official, and matters required to be kept confidential under state and federal law or regulations?
So moved.
Okay, so we need a roll call? And I don't know how you have to amend the initial roll call, because we have Sal and Maltree showed up. I don't know if you need to.
We typically indicate in the minutes when they arrived.
Okay, that's good enough for this vote? Okay.
Okay, calling roll, Michael Abuzaral,
Here,
Trevor
approve.
McLear.
Yes.
Okay, Salvador Talarico,
Yes.
Keith Libman, Meltree Sharp.
Okay, so I guess we're officially in executive session, so if we can